Our Lady of Guadalupe is a wondrous story filled with many miracles that scientists have studied and cannot explain. It is a miraculous image left on a modest Christian convert's tilma and has remained unblemished for close to 500 years. A tilma is an outer cloak made of plant fiber and used by a worker of the lower or middle class as either an apron or a cloak. However, despite its exposure to years of humidity mixed with saltpeter, candle wax, and soot, it remains pristine even after a nitric spill in 1791 and a direct bomb blast in 1921. It should have decayed within 20 years. You can visit this artifact in the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City. In this video, I will summarize how Juan Diego delivered this gift to us, and then I will spend the remainder of our time exploring the detailed scientific evidence that cannot conclude the tilma is man-made. It is always good to remind ourselves that Mary, our Blessed Mother, is our greatest saint. She was human. She answered the call to be the mother of our Savior Jesus Christ. She said, yes. Jesus gave us his mother as he was dying on the cross. In the 19th chapter of John, verses 26-27, Jesus said, "Woman, this is your son." Then to the disciple he said, "This is your mother." And from that hour on, the disciple took her into his home. And we, as disciples of Jesus, take Mary as our spiritual mother into our home too. The Spanish arrived in the area in 1519 and began building monasteries and convents. The conversion of Aztec natives to Christianity was very slow. By 1531, at the time of this great miracle, the Aztec civilization was still in control of Mexico City. This meant that there were human sacrifices, cannibalism, and pyramid temples built to worship the sun, the moon, and the feather serpent gods. Why? Why was that? What took so long? It was because the Christian Spaniards were tyrannical hypocrites. They were dragging priests from their pulpits and threatened them with violence for defending the rights of the Aztec Indians. Bishop Sumahara was even expecting martyrdom by the avenging Aztecs. Also, the Blessed Mother came because pictures and symbolism was a very effective way to communicate with illiterate people. Juan Diego was one of the Aztec Indian converts. He farmed, weaved mats, made furniture. He was a regular little house on the prairie kind of guy. He was humble, hardworking, and lived simply with his wife, Maria Lucia. When his wife died, Juan moved to Tolpetlac to live with his aging uncle, Juan Bernardino. The first apparition occurred in the very early morning of Saturday, December 9th, 1531. The 57-year-old Juan Diego was walking near the border of Tepeyac Hill to assist at the Mass honoring the Immaculate Conception of the Blessed Mother. Atop this 130-foot rock-strewn hill, he saw an apparition who called herself the perfect and perpetual Virgin Mary, Mother of the true God, through whom everything lives, the Lord of all things, who is Master of heaven and earth. She said she wanted a temple built here so she could serve and protect her children. She directed him to go to the bishop and tell him everything that he saw and heard. So Juan Diego set out to do just that. The bishop's servant met him at the gate and was unimpressed. He made Juan wait in the bitter cold for over an hour. Finally, Juan knelt before the bishop and his interpreter, Juan Gonzalez, and related his wondrous story. Although impressed by his sincerity and humility, the bishop dismissed him. The second apparition occurred while Juan was walking home. The lady met him again at the top of Tepeyac Hill. Juan told her that the bishop did not believe him, and she should send someone more important. She assured him that only he could accomplish her mission. He must go back to the bishop and instruct him again and remind him that she is the Virgin Mother. Sunday after Mass, Juan returned to the bishop's residence. The servants told him that the bishop was much too busy to see him. Juan persisted until he was again escorted to the patio, where he waited for several hours in the cold air. He felt humiliated by their judgment of his poverty. Bishop Zamahara was surprised to see him again and was unaware that he was detained for such a lengthy time. Because he was so tired and cold, Juan knelt before the bishop and wept. He pleaded that the bishop would follow the Blessed Mother's instructions. The bishop asked Juan some questions. Because Juan did not contradict himself, the bishop believed him, but worried about self-delusion. He asked Juan to bring him some proof. Juan asked, what proof would he require? The bishop decided that he would leave that up to the supposed vision. He dismissed him, but had him discreetly followed. The servants lost Juan in a ravine close to Tepeyac Hill. The third apparition. At the top of the rocky hill, Juan saw the Mother of God and knelt before her, sorrowfully relaying that the bishop required a sign. Mary was okay with that and instructed him to return tomorrow. Mark my words well, little son. I shall richly reward you for all the worry, work, and trouble you have undertaken on my behalf. You may go home now. Tomorrow I shall be waiting here for you. Juan hurried home but could not find his uncle. He searched the nearby woods and discovered that he had been shot with an arrow for associating with the Spanish missionaries. Juan rescued his uncle and began to doubt his visions. He decided not to keep his appointment with the lady. Juan's uncle got progressively worse overnight. He insisted that Juan get a priest to hear his confession and administer his last rites. Juan agreed. For the sake of his uncle, he decided to avoid encountering the Blessed Mother. As he was taking the long way around Tepeyac Hill, he was embarrassed to see the blazing white eminence of the Blessed Mother approaching him. He bowed low and with great emotion asked her forgiveness. He could not do as she asked because his uncle was dying. Juan promised that he would do her will the following morning. The lady silently gazed at him and with compassion and patience. What Our Lady said to Juanito, she is saying to each of us. Listen, and let it penetrate your heart, my dear little son. Do not be troubled or weighed down with grief. Do not fear any illness or vexation, anxiety or pain. Am I not here who am your mother? Are you not under my shadow and protection? Am I not your fountain of life? Are you not in the folds of my mantle? In the crossing of my arms? Is there anything else you need? She paused, smiling at him, and then added, Do not let the illness of your uncle worry you, because he is not going to die of his sickness, and at this very moment he is cured. At the same moment, Juan Diego's uncle, Juan Bernardino, was visited by the Blessed Mother. She cured him, and he asked her name. When she answered, his uncle heard her say, Guadalupe, which means the one who steps on or crushes the serpent. She sent Juan to the top of Tepeyac Hill to gather the flowers. He was dumbfounded to see an overabundance of colorful flowers, including Castilian roses, that filled the air with an amazing fragrance in the middle of winter. He filled his tilma and returned to the lady, who was waiting in an oval-shaped white brilliance. She arranged the flowers carefully and instructed him to not unfold it until he was in the presence of the bishop. He should tell the bishop everything he saw and heard, and that she wanted a temple built. Of course, the servants wanted to see what was under Juan's cloak. They gave him a very hard time. He eventually got into the bishop and revealed the miracle. Everyone present instantly knelt before him, and he was just as surprised to look down and see the image of the Blessed Mother. Because Diego was a Christian and spoke both the Indian and Spanish language, He welcomed Aztecs to the site to hear his in-depth testimony. Juan Diego remained the caretaker of the tilma until his death at 74 years old in 1548. When you visit Mexico City and the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe, this is what you will be privileged to see. Scientific investigation of the physical evidence. As scientists, we can analyze this artifact several different ways. First, I will discuss the physical nature of the material that makes up Juan's tilma, and then other unexplainable phenomena. Like others in the middle class, Juan Diego tied his tilma around his neck and used it for warmth. He could also turn it around and use it as an apron to carry many things. The tilma is made from the coarse ayate fiber of the agave americana, commonly known as the maguey cactus. Professor Victor Campa Mendoza, a professor of ethics at the Technological Institute of Durango, Mexico, has scientifically studied this image his entire career. He is convinced that the image on the tilma is a true miracle. He says, "This is not a human act, but an act of God. This has become known as an akaropoeton, which is Byzantine Greek for not made by human hands." Professor Mendoza says he has accumulated enough evidence to prove it. The tilma remains in pristine condition. Textile experts are baffled as to how it has continued to exist for close to 500 years. The organic lifetime of such a garment is between 5 and 20 years. In the earliest years, it was exposed to a lot of touching, the Mexican heat, salty humidity, dust, candle heat, and soot without discoloration or deterioration. Tilmas at that time were strewn with a large seam up the middle. On the image of Our Lady, you can see that it is thick and transparent in some places. Her head is also tilted in prayer so that the center seam is not on her face. In 1629, there was a major flood in Mexico City that killed 30,000 people. The tilma was folded into thirds to transport it to safety. It is hard to see, but there are creases in the fabric. If we examine this image as an artist, we should expect to see a prepared surface to fill the porous exterior of the agave. The tilma remains porous and very thin in some places along the center seam. There should also be signs of an outline sketch and brushstrokes. There is no sign of these either. Also, the uneven, rough surface of the agave texture creates the appearance of volume. The tilma should have an overlaying varnish to seal in the paint, but it does not. The size of the image is 66 by 41 inches. This demonstrates the golden ratio. That is, the perfect symmetrical relationship between two proportions. The lady is 56 inches tall, or 4 feet 8 inches. In 1936, Richard Kuhn, a Nobel laureate chemist, studied two colored fibers from the tilma. He stated, "There was no coloring of any kind in the fibers. The materials used to produce what represented colors are unknown to science, being neither animal, vegetable, nor mineral dyes. There is no way to explain the kind of color of the pigments. There is no trace of paint residue or dye. Artists are not able to reproduce the iridescent characteristic, that is, a slight change in color that occurs when viewing the object from slightly different angles." Attempts to replicate. In 1789, artists were commissioned to reproduce the image onto two maguey cloths that were identical to the original. One was embellished with a crown and angels in the clouds. In addition, gold was coated onto the sun and silver was added to the moon. Both paintings were exposed to the same salty and humid environment as the original tilma. The gold on the crown wore away and the silver on the moon turned black. All the paint and materials disintegrated within several decades. Enhancements. Unfortunately, There are substantial embellishments in the original cloak of Juan Diego. Now, why would anybody feel the need to improve on a gift from God? The hypothesis is that adding native symbolism would help convert the Aztecs. This goes back to the concept that iconography educates the illiterate. On May 7, 1979, Philip Callahan, an accomplished biologist, was invited to conduct infrared photographic tests on the tilma. This would reveal the historic changes in any document or painting that occurred in any kind of artifact. He took 40 exposures within a 3-hour period. He took photos from a distance and close up. This is what the original gift from the Blessed Mother looked like. The first editions were the moon and the tassel, followed by the gold and black decorations, the cherub at the base, the fold in the robe, the sunburst, and the background. The elements that were found to be original are the rose-colored robe, the blue-green mantle, the face, and the hands. In addition to these, Callahan concluded, in terms of this infrared study, there is no way to explain either the kind of color pigments or the maintenance of color, the luminosity and brightness over the centuries. The origin of the enhancements can be found in Juan Diego's description of the Blessed Mother in the 1649 manuscript called the Nicanmol Pahoya, or in English, Here It Is Told. Juan Diego said her clothing was shining like the sun, as if it were sending out waves of light. In addition, these enhancements are traced back to almost the beginning. The image was given to us in 1531. The earliest evidence we have that enhancements were made is on the Codex 1548, that is, a pictograph made on preserved deerskin. On here you can see the stars on her mantle, the rays of the sun, and the moon at her feet. It is clear that the intention was to portray Mary as found in the 12th chapter in the book of Revelations. A great sign appeared in the sky, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. This was meaningful to the Spaniards. Other enhancements were especially meaningful to the Aztecs. Diego's tilma displays our Blessed Mother proclaiming the true God by standing in front of the sun and on top of the moon. This ellipse represents dominance over the Aztec sun and moon god. She triumphs over evil. The moon in crescent represents perpetual virginity. Her hands are in prayer and her head is bowed. This declares that she is not claiming to be God. The angel at the bottom of the tilma has eagle wings, signaling the shifting religious orientation between the two nations. The eagle represents the Aztec offerings to their gods. Angels are a symbol of royalty. In Christianity, the angel is a messenger of God. Aztec women's dress consists of open collar shirts, knee-length skirts, and white sleeveless or triangular capes. Our Lady wears a mantle and long dress as Jewish women of her time. Our Lady's complexion is of Spanish and Mexican mixed blood called mestizo. Both Jewish and Aztec women wore a black sash when they were pregnant. The sash was worn higher above the baby as a symbol of the flower of the sun, meaning abundance and new life. This also identifies her as a maternal link between Europe and the Americas. The golden brooch she wears around her neck is a symbol of sanctity. The cross signifies Christianity. The Blessed Mother is wearing a rose-colored dress heralding the dawn of a new era. It is covered with gold flowers that symbolically denote words and concepts in Nahuatl, the Aztec native language. The 4-petal jasmine flower represents the single highest God that was involved with humanity. Since one of these flowers is positioned in the fold over the womb, the child will be divine and accessible through this mother. The dress also contains a triangular blossom that symbolizes a hill, while its long curved stem means water. The eyes. There is a tremendous fascination with the eyes of Our Lady in the tilma. In 1929, the official photographer of the old basilica took close-up pictures. He reported to the church authorities that there was a bearded man in the eyes of Our Lady. He was immediately bound to secrecy. In 1951, the phenomenon was rediscovered. This time, more than 20 ophthalmologists, physicians, and photography experts converged on the artifact. The bearded figure was confirmed in both corneas using the ophthalmoscope. In 1956, it was certified that the images within the lady's eyes accurately portray the Sanson-Purkinje effect. This shows 4 reflections on the eye caused by the curvature of the cornea and can be observed in photography. In 1962, a nuclear physicist and optician, Charles Wallig, used his family to reproduce the effect seen in the tilma's eyes. This detailed photograph is 1/4 of a micron. This effect can be seen on photographs but not paintings. In 1979, Dr. Jose Tonsman photographed the eyes of the tilma in an even higher 2500 magnification. With this enhancement technique, he reported finding much more than just the bearded man. In fact, it shows everyone present when Juan Diego opened his tilma. It is surmised that the image was created as a reflection of the presence of the Blessed Mother at that moment. From left, the Indian, Bishop Zumahara, the translator, and Juan Diego showing the tilma. Miracles. There are many major miracles associated with this tilma. First, the tilma itself, and that it is still pristine close to 500 years later. The instantaneous healing of Juan's uncle. The conversion of 8 to 9 million Aztecs to Christianity within the first few years. This includes the eradication of 20,000 human sacrifices to the feathered serpent god. During the initial celebrations of the image, a large group of Mexicans were shooting volleys of arrows into the air. One arrow landed through the neck of a man and killed him instantly. The group carried him to the new chapel and rested him in front of the holy tilma. He was resurrected and lived the rest of his life with just a scar in his neck. In 1544, a prayerful pilgrimage to Tepeyac Hill resulted in the termination of a plague that had claimed more than 12,000 lives in Mexico City. Bishop Zumahara asked Juan to take him to the site of the 4th apparition sometime between 1544 and 1548. When Juan approached the area, he was unsure of the location. Instantaneously, a spring appeared a little further away. He then remembered it was the correct spot. The water continues to flow today, and many miracle cures have been reported through this spring. In 1791, a worker had an accident while using a nitric acid solution to clean the gold and silver frame surrounding the sacred image. The solution spilled behind the glass and ran down the side of the fabric, but left nothing more than a watermark. In 1921, Mexico City was filled with corruption. Catholicism was outlawed, and many clergy were martyred. A time bomb with 29 sticks of dynamite had been concealed in flowers and left on the altar directly under the tilma. It exploded during the morning mass and broke the marble altar rail, the marble floor, and windows that were 150 meters away. The large bronze candlesticks were twisted and melted. No one present was seriously hurt. The stunned celebrants and congregation saw that the image was unscathed behind its thin protective glass. The large, heavy altar crucifix was twisted and bent, but unmarked. Since 1993, the tilma has been protected by a bulletproof glass in the Basilica of Guadalupe and secured behind a large safe. Here is a picture of the original chapel on Tepeyac Hill. Here is the old basilica that has since subsided by 4 meters. Here is the replacement basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe, inspired by her mantle of the Blessed Mother as it is seen today. There is a large gap behind the altar where the public can walk beneath the secured tilma behind bulletproof glass. Behind the tilma is a second floor where the tilma is secured in a safe. The interior of the basilica's rotunda features 10 balcony chapels for small group private masses. Thanks for listening to Our Lady of Guadalupe's story. References have been provided on each slide. See my playlist and YouTube channel for several more shows like this one.